My Lord and my God, I firmly believe that you are here, that you see me, that you hear me. I adore you with profound reverence. I ask you for pardon of my sins and grace to make this time of prayer fruitful. My Mother Immaculate, Saint Joseph, my Father and Lord, my guardian angel, intercede for me. In today's Gospel, Jesus, you speak to us about faith with a very striking image. St. Luke tells us, the apostles said to the Lord, "Increase our faith." The Lord replied, "If you have faith the size of a mustard seed, you would say to this mulberry tree, 'Be uprooted and planted in the sea,' and it would obey you." So Lord, even if I had a little faith, even just the size of a mustard seed, that amazing thing would happen. And therefore it's not surprising that with the apostles, we too would cry out to Jesus in our prayer now and say, "Lord, increase our faith. Increase our faith." And how can we grow in faith? How can we have a living faith that shapes our lives, our decisions, our reactions too? Well, the first thing is to ask for the gift, like the apostles show us here. Lord, increase our faith. And then we need to use the language of faith and practice the language of faith, which is prayer. Prayer is the language of faith. Even saying to the Lord, "Increase our faith," that's already a prayer. The Holy Curé of Ars, Saint Jean-Marie Vianney, he says somewhere that this is faith, when we speak to the Lord as we would speak to any other person. And in these meditations, the style of these meditations on 10 minutes with Jesus is designed precisely to help us to learn and to persevere in our personal dialogue with Jesus, with you, Lord, speaking from the heart, nothing artificial, speaking what we feel, what we think, what we need, what we feel sorrowful for, what we feel joyful for, bringing all that to the Lord. This is faith, says Jean-Marie Vianney, to speak with the Lord as we would speak with any other person. And we see that all the time in the Gospels, in the way the apostles deal with our Lord. We could say we see it also in the saint whose feast is today, Saint Faustina Kowalska, although of course, given that it's a Sunday, her feast is not celebrated liturgically this year. But if we look at her diary, it's all about a dialogue between Jesus and her, between Saint Faustina and the Lord. A great simple ongoing conversation, the story of her life. Jesus, may that also be the story of my life, that it would be an ongoing, trusting conversation with you. Teach me to learn how to do this, and maybe I need to relearn how to do it every day to some degree. I remember once asking a young child, "Do you pray?" And this little fellow, he was very young. He answered me, surprisingly, he said, "Yes, I pray, Father. Do you pray?" That's the bit that took me by surprise. I wasn't expecting him to ask me that question. And as I could see that this was very much a conversation man to man, heart to heart, I answered him honestly. I said, "Yeah, I try and pray." And he looked at me a bit surprised and said, "What do you mean you try and pray?" And I explained that sometimes I found it hard to pray because I was distracted, or I wasn't in the mood, or I was tired, or because I felt there was no connection maybe with the Lord sometimes when I was trying to pray. And then he said to me, I can't reproduce his words, as it were, but certainly the concept I remember very clearly. The idea was, he said, to pray with God is very easy, because when we speak with anybody else. For example, even a person who loves us very, very much, like our mother or our father or our best friend, when we begin to speak with them, we often have to, as it were, present ourselves and say, well, look, this is how I'm feeling today. This is what I've done. In a sense, we have to give a bit of an introduction, a bit of context in that conversation, even with a person with whom we're very, very close. But this young fellow said, but with God, there's no need for any of that, because he knows perfectly well already how we're feeling, how we're doing. We don't need to make any presentation or give any context. And in that sense, this was his lesson to me. Prayer is easy. I remember thinking, wow, this is wonderful, that from very young people, from children, we can learn so much about God, because so often they are really, really close to God. So Jesus, I ask you in this meditation today to help me to speak with you with tremendous confidence, with simplicity, without any, artificiality, just to be myself, because you are always yourself with us. Help me to grow in the language of faith, which is prayer. So how do you grow in faith? How do I grow in faith? Through prayer. And that prayer would be natural, trusting, simple, straightforward, like we see in the lives of so many saints, those who are canonized and those who are not canonized. Help me to be spontaneous. Help me just to open my heart. Often, too, our prayer of faith, the language of faith, will simply be listening to God. It's not that we have to speak all the time in the period of mental prayer. We can be listening for the inspirations, the affections, the resolutions, the little prompts or messages that the Lord wants to give us. St. Josemaria at times used to say, the theme of my prayer is the theme of my life. And that makes a lot of sense. That we would speak to the Lord just about whatever's going on in our lives, the people around us, our job, our family, our challenges, our joys, our pains, our concerns. The theme of my prayer, Lord, is the theme of my life, because I know, Lord, that you are interested in everything about me. Every hair on your head is counted, the Lord tells us. That's how much He loves us. That's the level of detail, of concern that God has with us. In the first reading of today's Mass, we have a passage from the prophet Habakkuk, where we find those interesting words. The just man lives by faith. The holy person is someone who lives because of his or her faith. And we could say that the holy person, the saint, is the one who prays. Holiness without prayer, says St. Josemaria, I don't believe in such holiness. And it's true. How could we be holy if we didn't listen to God, if we didn't speak to God? So sometimes maybe we suffer from what we feel is a lack of faith. We don't feel the presence of our Lord, or we don't perceive His action in our lives. That can be a test. That can be a real challenge. But even in those moments, we have to be ourselves simply before God and say, Lord, where are you? I place my trust in you. I know you love me even though I don't feel it right now. I know that the light will return after the darkness. In whatever situation we're in, prayer is always the language of faith. We think of Mary. Blessed is she who believed. I thank you, my God, for the good resolutions, affections, and inspirations you have communicated to me in this time of prayer. I ask you for help to put them into effect. My Mother Immaculate, Saint Joseph, my Father and Lord, my guardian angel, intercede for me.